Hello, my name is Jason Reichl, and you're listening to Risk Management Brick by Brick. I'm fascinated with people who are helping build and maintain the physical world around us. On each episode of this podcast, we'll dive in with a risk manager, speak to them about how technology plays a role in this process. It's my pleasure to welcome Holly LeClair to Brick by Brick. Holly's the Director of Health, Safety, and Risk Management at ReArch Company. Her focus lies in the intersection of construction technology and risk management, and has worked in the construction and insurance industry for over 25 years. A fascinating discussion here for you today, but let's get into it. Holly, thank you for joining me on Brick by Brick today.
Thank you for having me.
So for our audience, what's your title? Who do you work for? And let's do a little bit of how did you end up here on the Orange Couch?
How did I end up here? That's a great question. Well, I am the Director of Health, Safety, and Risk Management at a small construction management company in Vermont called ReArch Company. My role is truly health, safety, and risk management for the company. I started in safety in 1995 and then evolved in the construction industry and insurance industry, and then saw so many different aspects of both businesses and really love the piece of risk and how it has evolved over the years. And right now I spend a lot of my time, not just on the safety piece of it for the construction company, but also on all the different types of risks that we have for the organization.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So we operate within a company called TrustLayer, work a lot with contractual risk transfer. That's a big element. But that's not the only part of a risk management program, right? So for you, when you think and break down risk, what does that actually mean to you on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. So I break it down in chunks. There's the prevention side. I think of it as like a horse and a cart, which comes first. And so looking at the safety, can I prevent this from happening? And then I look at, well, if it didn't get prevented and there is a claim, there's that piece of it. And then there's the whole risk involved with a whole transaction. How can it affect us financially?
Yeah, one thing, so we do this, we talk a lot about what the modern risk manager looks like. And you don't have a business without taking risk, especially in construction. How do you communicate that risk? You talked about it has evolved since when you first came on, and I think that's true with almost all risk management. They have to deal with cybersecurity now. They have to deal with all these other elements outside of just this one bucket that used to be risk. And because of that, their profiles are rising within organizations. Have you found that true in your career? And what's some of the stories where you've seen things evolve?
Sure. The biggest evolution for me is how I can leverage the technology. So when I think about when I started with what I do, things were on a binder on a shelf. And for you to look at the data, you'd have to go to the binder to look at it. Now it can be virtual for everyone to utilize. So it's more efficient, but it's also, you can involve the whole team in one snapshot by using technology because you can use it on multiple platforms, whether it's your phone, your iPad, your computer. So that's, I think, the biggest change. But it's also, I think there's more communication around like project specific. So for example, what's coming up? What are our risks going to be, whether it's at the job startup or it's the week to week or the closeout? What did we learn? So I think there's a lot more opportunities now for the risk manager to be part of that whole process from start to finish.
Which integrates them more into the team. So then risk managers aren't looked at as this person who's stopping the work, but integrated throughout the work, correct?
Exactly. And they realize also there's a lot more efficiencies if we use the system.
Yeah. When we talk about technologies, how have you worked to transform your organization's approach to technology? Were you always a technology first organization? Was that something you had to introduce and work with people on? Like, what did that look like for you?
It looked a little different than it is now, for sure. With that, when I jumped on board 3 years ago, I realized with our Procore platform that there is inspections and observations and everything built in, and then using different platforms, whether it's in a Microsoft platform to be able to share data with the whole team and have it all in one place so that we're more efficient. In addition to that, using, again, more programs like Power BI to take all the data and put it in one dashboard and snapshot so that we can look at the whole picture together.
And then people like project managers and other people appreciate that clarity that before they didn't have, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, and they can see it all.
What you're queuing in on is something that I talk to a lot of risk managers about integrating your role as an asset within your organization, bringing things up at pre-construction all the way through to the end, making sure that you're integrated into that as much as possible. What do you do when you run into a conflict, right? So if you have a project manager who you're saying, hey, this should maybe happen, or there's this issue, great question that people often ask is, and people sometimes talk about it on the podcast, but they don't give practical answers, which is, we want to make risk something that's rewarded for pointing out, not just something that happens after something bad occurs, right?
Sure.
We want to make everyone part of that experience. What are some of your tactics that you use to integrate the whole team into the risk profile?
Well, I feel really fortunate. I work with a team that loves to communicate, and they understand that I want to look at solutions together and not give, this is the way it has to be. So if we have looked at it ahead of time with enough time, again, proactively versus reactively, we have more time to look at solutions that's going to work for the project. It's not just cut and dry. We have a lot more time to explore options. And with that, you can see the experience of it speaks for itself. And then it just shows throughout the entire company.
Amazing. Where do you feel or are you excited about exploring technology as it intersects with your job in the next few years?
I would like to continue to use products like Power BI to take all the data that I use and put it into one dashboard, because it saves me a lot of time. And if it saves me time, I can be out in the field looking at where the risks are actually happening. So that's making myself more efficient as the company grows.
That's something interesting. So there's a debate that sometimes I have with risk managers, and it seems to be the ones that I align to most believe that getting out into the field and being on site and looking at things is a critical element of the process. So it sounds like you do that as well, and that you believe that's critical.
Absolutely, because it's one thing to talk about it, but it's the most important thing to see it, see it in action and discover the risk as it's unfolding instead of after.
Yeah, amazing. So when you're talking about your one dashboard to rule them all, what kind of data do you produce to the team?
I'm looking at different types of safety observations. So we're looking at whether it's a safety hazard or if somebody's reported a proper safety observation. I love to catch people doing something safe and right, really finding that the more you can do that and promote the positive, the more reinforcement you have, the more likely you're going to have that behavior continue. And then also inspection data, whether it's my inspections, the field inspections, or project manager inspections, it's all in one dashboard. So you can look at it as a whole company or individually as a project.
Amazing. Thank you very much. As a risk manager, do you buy your own insurance? And when you have access to this data, are you taking the data and presenting it to your broker, to your carrier, as a way of keeping premiums low or negotiating for more flexible terms? Because that seems to be an area where there needs to be more movement happening. And I'm always interested in what people are doing with the data.
That's a great question. So we are in a captive. So all of our claims, all of our information is front and center. Well, we don't have to keep it, but we do. And how I utilize it is the more observations I can look at from that dashboard, I'm able to see a frequency before it becomes a severity. So it absolutely helps in the insurance process because I am able to show how much more proactive I can be, not only just for myself, but our subcontractors as well. So when we're looking at the site as a whole, I can see where all of the safety initiatives are happening and the safety, whether it's good or bad. And then it all gets boiled into one spreadsheet in one place so that it's easy to read the data and then to show whether it's insurance people or even OSHA. They're looking at the same data too, and they want to see, wow, you're really tracking this stuff. And that's the more ability to be proactive, and then you have better results in the end.
That's amazing. I think it's really critical element. We have a lot of risk managers who come up through the construction industry who have been exposed to insurance, bought insurance, worked with brokers, and they don't have a holistic approach to this. It's piecemealed. How do you start that conversation with your broker, your carrier? Do you give them this access to the spreadsheet? Like, how do you maneuver this to be part of the conversation, right?
So what's helpful for me is because I started in the construction industry, then I went to the agency side, to the carrier side, back to the agency, back to the construction. And I say that because I see all avenues or saw all avenues of it. And you have to be your own advocate. You have to show the data. You have to show what you're doing. And for me personally, I'm very excited about what I do. And it comes through with a broker And then not only do I show them the data, but if they visit the site and they visit what we're doing, they're seeing that I'm actually doing what I'm saying I'm doing on paper.
Amazing. I think practical and using then data to marry those two things is a element that a lot of risk managers aren't really doing right now. So I think that's really great advice. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Risk Management Brick by Brick is brought to you by TrustLayer. Find out how TrustLayer manages risk so that the people can build the physical world around us. Head over to trustlayer.io. And then make sure to subscribe to Risk Management Brick by Brick on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. On behalf of the TrustLayer team, thank you for listening.